You've probably never heard of the most powerful company that ever existed. It had its own army and its own navy. It could mint its own money, sign its own treaties, wage its own wars, and execute anyone who got in its way. For nearly 200 years, it ran a piece of the world like a private kingdom. You may even have seen the claim that, at its peak, it was worth $7.9 trillion, more than Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon combined. That number is a myth, and we'll get to why. But the real story underneath it is almost stranger, how a spice sitting in your kitchen right now built history's first global corporation, and one of its first corporate atrocities. This is the VOC, the Dutch East India Company. It begins with flavor. In medieval Europe, food was mostly a matter of survival, not pleasure. Then trade with the East brought back pepper, cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg. And the wealthy lost their minds. Spices became the ultimate luxury, a way to display status, and people believed, to cure disease. There was just one problem. The supply ran through middlemen. Venice and the Ottoman Empire sat astride the old routes from Asia, and they charged whatever they liked. And when a handful of dried seeds costs more than gold, sooner or later someone decides to cut out the middleman. That someone was Portugal. By sailing around the southern tip of Africa, the Portuguese found a sea route straight to Asia, load up with spices, sail home, sell them for a fortune. For decades, the Dutch were happy to simply buy from Lisbon and resell at a profit. Then politics intervened. In 1580, Spain absorbed Portugal, and Spain happened to be at war with the Dutch, who were fighting a long and brutal revolt for their independence. Madrid cut the rebels off. No more spices for the Dutch. Almost overnight, Amsterdam was locked out of the most profitable trade on earth. The Dutch now had two choices: give up or go to Asia themselves. They went. In the 1590s, a Dutch fleet set out to find the Spice Islands using maps that were little more than rumor. The voyage was a horror. Scurvy rotted the crew's gums and loosened their teeth. Men went blind and died at sea. They reached the islands, antagonized nearly everyone they met, and limped home years later, having barely covered their costs. Of 249 men who set out, only 87 came back alive. And yet to the investors, the voyage was a triumph, because it proved the one thing that mattered more than profit. The route was real. That was all it took. Within a few years, rival Dutch companies were racing each other to Asia, bidding prices up abroad and crashing them at home. Chaos that threatened to ruin them all. So, in 1602, the Dutch government forced them to merge into a single entity, the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, the VOC. And this was no ordinary company. The state handed it the power to build forts, raise armies, mint coins, sign treaties, and wage war in Asia on the government's behalf. To fund something that enormous, the VOC did something genuinely new. It sold shares to the public. For the first time, an ordinary person, a baker, a widow, a servant, could own a piece of a corporation and trade that piece on an open market. The modern stock market was born in Amsterdam, and those new shareholders wanted exactly one thing: returns. The surest way to deliver them was a monopoly, and the EVOC was prepared to enforce one by any means necessary. Which brings us to 10 tiny volcanic islands in what is now eastern Indonesia, the Banda Islands. They mattered for a single reason. They were the only place on Earth where nutmeg grew. In an age when people believed nutmeg could ward off the plague, a pound of it could be worth more than a pound of gold. For centuries, the Bandanese had sold their spice to whoever paid best: Chinese, Arab, Portuguese, and English traders alike. Then the Dutch arrived demanding something the islanders had never agreed to: that they sell to the VOC alone, at prices the VOC set with Dutch forts built on their land. The Bandanese resisted. In 1609, after talks collapsed, they ambushed and killed the Dutch commander and dozens of his men. The VOC did not forget. Its answer came in 1621 under a governor-general named Jan Pieterszoon Cohen. Cohen had concluded that the spice trade would only ever be secure if the Bandanese were simply removed and replaced with people who answered to the company. He arrived with around 1,600 soldiers and a band of Japanese mercenaries, forced the islanders' leaders to sign an impossible treaty, then used its inevitable violation as a pretext. 44 of the island's elders were seized, beheaded, and quartered. their heads displayed on bamboo poles. What followed was systematic. Villages burned, people hunted into the hills, food supplies destroyed. Of a population estimated at roughly 15,000, perhaps 1,000 remained on the islands afterward. The rest killed, enslaved, deported, or starved. It was, by any modern definition, a genocide. With the Bandanese gone, the VOC carved the land into plantations, handed them to Dutch settlers, and worked them with enslaved laborers shipped in from across Asia. The nutmeg now belonged entirely to the company. Bought for almost nothing, sold in Europe for a staggering markup, no questions asked. By the 1630s, the VOC had stopped being a trading company and become a colonial power that happened to have shareholders. From its fortified capital at Batavia, modern Jakarta, it controlled not just spices but the arteries of Asian trade. It didn't need to rule the whole continent. It only needed to hold the narrow passages the trade flowed through and charge a fee on everyone who passed. But its real money engine was quieter. Instead of hauling European silver to Asia, the VOC learned to trade within Asia, buying goods cheap in one port, selling them dear in another, and using those local profits to fill its ships with the spice, tea, and silk that Europe craved. Repeat that for decades and you become the richest company on Earth. At its height, it ran roughly 150 merchant ships and 40 warships, employed some 50,000 people, kept a private army of around 10,000, and paid dividends as high as 40%. One small footnote captures the whole era. The VOC so prized a single nutmeg island called Run that in 1667, the English finally surrendered their claim to it in exchange for a small far-off Dutch colony called New Amsterdam. Today we call it Manhattan. But the machine was rotting from the inside. The VOC was run by a board known as the 17 Gentlemen, and their idea of accountability was to send shareholders a cheerful annual note that amounted to, "Everything is wonderful. Here is your dividend. Please stop asking questions." There were no real audits. Meanwhile, 10,000 miles away, the company's own employees had realized that no one was watching. Private trading was officially banned, but in practice, ships sometimes sailed stuffed with the crew's personal cargo, while the company's own goods came second. The VOC tried rules, threats, the occasional public firing, and when none of it worked, it settled on a final strategy. If we can't stop you stealing, we'll tax it. All the while, it was fighting expensive wars on several fronts, and rather than cut the dividends its shareholders demanded, it borrowed, paying old investors with new debt. And while the VOC grew fat and corrupt, its rivals caught up. The English East India Company stopped chasing spices and pivoted to Indian textiles and tea, the growth industry of the coming century. Then came the final blow. In the 1770s, live nutmeg seedlings were finally smuggled off the Banda Islands and replanted elsewhere. The monopoly that had been used to justify a genocide simply evaporated, and prices collapsed. By 1799, drowning in well over 100 million guilders of debt, the world's first great corporation was quietly dissolved. But the end of the company was not the end of the suffering. The Dutch government took over its territories, and instead of dismantling the system, it intensified it. In 1830, it imposed what was called the cultivation system. Villages in Java were forced to hand over a share of their land and labor to grow cash crops for export. Farmers stopped planting the rice that fed their families in order to grow sugar and coffee for Europe. And when the harvest failed, famine followed, killing hundreds of thousands. That system became one of the single largest sources of revenue for the entire Dutch state. Back home, the VOC was remembered as the pride of a golden age. Bold explorers, global trade, national greatness. The slavery and the massacres were left in the footnotes if they appeared at all. It took the Netherlands until the 21st century to begin reckoning honestly with what the company had really been. Because the VOC was something genuinely new in the world, the first multinational corporation, the first publicly traded company, the ancestor of every modern corporation that followed. It was also one of the most efficient machines ever built for turning conquest and forced labor into steady returns for its shareholders. The Governor General who oversaw the Banda genocide once reduced the entire philosophy to a single line, that trade could not be carried on without war, nor war without trade. 4 centuries later, the company itself is almost forgotten. The model it invented is everywhere.